Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's LinkedIn Live session brought to you by MZ Burning Glass. I'm Haley, Product Marketer of Staffing here at EBG. I wanted to take a second to thank you for joining us today, a couple minutes late. We encourage you to submit questions and comments in the chat throughout today's demo, and we'll try to answer as many as we can in the last couple minutes of our session today. Today, we're going to be giving a demo of our latest staffing tool called SmartReq. SmartReq was created by Ron Hetrick, Senior Labor Economist and Director of Staffing Products at MZ Burning Glass. With 30 years of experience in labor economics, he's considered to be a leading expert in the current state of the U.S. labor market. Ron started his career at the Bureau of Labor Statistics in Washington, D.C. He then took on the roles of advising economist and director of market analytics and data science teams for the largest staffing company in the U.S. before joining MZ Burning Glass. Ron keynotes conferences on trends in the labor market and publishes frequently. He's been quoted by CNBC, CNN, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal, Forbes, and numerous other nationally syndicated news agencies. So, without further ado, we're going to kick this over to Ron and begin with a question. Ron, what is a Req anyway? And can you show us how SmartReq works?
Absolutely. So, hey, nice to see everyone today. So a Req in the staffing industry is basically a requisition, a job order. So companies that are looking to hire, put these postings out, these job postings out to the market or give them to staffing companies with the intent of these staffing companies being able to see those postings and digest them and then make decisions about filling those things. So with that in mind, I want to kind of talk about what is SmartReq and what was I trying to do with this? So one of the biggest issues we're facing right now across the globe, but particularly in the US, is that we are just simply running out of people. So the best thing that we can often do is make really good decisions with the people that we have. So what is a good Req? What is something that a recruiter is going to be able to fill means, what is something that there is a supply out there and that you can get that person that job and then hopefully get the best price point possible. Oftentimes, staffing companies don't get the best price point because they simply do not bring the right information to their clients when they're negotiating, or the client thinks, well, you're biased because you're from this company. And so what we wanted to do was being MZ Burning Glass and knowing that we sit in a neutral position and that we sell labor data to all kinds of companies, I felt it was a very good spot for us to be in to help advise staffing companies on giving them a weapon that they could take into negotiations. Now, the tool actually has two stages to it. It actually also finds business. So we're going to start with that part of the tool. So the tool actually exists. It's very, very simple to use. It really only has basically two screens, but I'm going to show you the additional feature that drives the first screen. So when you use SmartReq, you're basically you're going to get to know who you are. So this was meant to be at an office level, an account manager who's out in a market, selling a specific type of industry, specific type of occupations. So what it would do is you can come into it and you can say, hey, I want to generate a preset. So in this particular case, I have several here that I've used as examples. I live in, Jacksonville, Florida. And in this, I can basically tell it, hey, SmartReq, I live in Jacksonville. These companies are my customers. These are my prospects. If I have companies that I'm not allowed to sell to at all, maybe they're a VMS and I'm locked out, you can even choose to exclude those. But basically what you're telling it is, please don't show me job postings from those companies. But these companies here, I do want to see them. And my customers are the most important part of it. You can then tell it, hey, I don't want to see postings in certain industries. So please don't show me, postings for retail trade or for restaurants and things like that. So you can choose to exclude industries. You could actually choose to include only an industry. If you're saying, I just want to see manufacturing, Reqs in my market, you can do that. And then lastly, I have handpicked all of these occupational buckets based on my time in the staffing industry. And even there we have, not only do we have these occupations, but we actually have denoted some as strengths, some as targets, some you can exclude from that list. If you want to add jobs to this, you can. If you don't want to use any of our lists and generate your own, you can simply type those jobs in and add those to this list. But basically what you're trying to tell the system is, I have companies and clients that I highly value. These are the ones that I would want to know about anything that they were doing on the market. I have occupations that I know I'm good at because I fill these things all the time. And then you basically tell SmartReq, go out and find me all of the job postings. And we're piping in Burning Glass's 12 million job postings a month into this tool. And it's going out and it starts to organize this information into these, what we call these, like basically cards. And so the card has several key aspects. So anything that shows up at the top is an occupation that you told us is a strength, something that you do all the time. And this heart means that this is a client of yours. So this would be the best thing for you to look at. So just in case you were not aware that this hit the market, we're going to make sure that this shows up first in your list. And then you can even get on this a quick assessment, economically speaking, of the difficulty to fill of this particular job posting. So in doing that, you have a number of different things that you can choose from as you're kind of going through, going, well, maybe I don't want to touch the very difficult. Maybe I do want to, to look at those. But any of the things that you choose, you can actually go and see the posting, at its original website. If the thing, I'm sorry, this one, not the dead one. At ones that have anything that we scraped off the website, you can go and choose postings from it. I'm going to bring up another preset that I have here for this. So this is Atlanta. This is light industrial. If you look, I actually have the same things here. I've got clients. I've got certain ones of these that I have already picked as strength occupations. This one I know does work. So this one has, so this goes to the actual website for the company and shows you the actual posting. So if there's contact information there that you want to glean, if you want to kind of just glance over the posting, see what was required, what wasn't required, you can go and do that as well, utilizing this tool. So you can also do other things in this card, like changing the customer to, hey, you know what, they're not a customer anymore, or you can change them to prospects. You can change occupations to strengths or targets. The last thing you can do is, let's say you just got a really great candidate in, you can come in here and paste a resume. It's going to analyze that resume, tell you all of the different jobs this person can do, and you can choose those job titles and then run it. And it's going to show you everybody in the market that's trying to hire someone like that at this particular time, just in case you were trying to pro-market a really great candidate out into the market. So with that in mind, you can take any one of these and jump to the next screen and start to do an assessment of, what's the market like. So let's just pick this general labor at Coca-Cola. So this is the second part of the tool. So the first part we call Find a Rec, and the second part we call Sell a Rec. And why it's called Sell a Rec is for two reasons. One, you're going to want to sell this first to yourself. Like, do I want to do this, right? Is this something I think I can fill? And then the other part of this is, if I'm going to do this and I want to, go to path and talk with this client, how can I sell this to the client that I want to do this job, but also how can I sell to them the fact that we need to make some adjustments to this? So what do I mean by that? Well, anybody who's ever had to fill a rec knows that sometimes and you're not totally sure if what you've been given is just, a grenade that's just going to go off in your hands, and you won't be able to, your recruiters are going to be out there trying to fill this thing for forever because maybe the pay rate's wrong, or maybe they're asking for something really quirky in the job posting itself. And you don't know that until your recruiter's been working on it for a couple of weeks. So what we tried to do is, what could we do up front to identify these things to allow people to negotiate a more fillable rec? So basically what happens is we break this down into three sections. The first thing we do is we say, okay, let's look at this market, in this case, Atlanta. Let's look at this particular occupation. Let's calculate how many people are available at this particular time for the number of postings that are out there. And then we're going to compare that to all markets that are like Atlanta's size. So we never compare markets to each other that just it wouldn't make sense. So if you're in a small market, we're not going to compare it to New York City. We're going to compare New York City to other large markets like Washington, D.C. or Silicon Valley or things like that. That way, when you see things, you understand, like, look, for this size of a market, this is a good market for this, or this is a bad market for this. So this is what we have first off in our supply, is that when we look at Atlanta for this type of a job, these production worker type of jobs, we see that they actually have a very poor supply. The other thing that's happened is it's brought in the job description, and it's broken all of the elements out from the job description that we could find. And then it tells you, hey, when we go in and we look at people in this market that say that they do this, to understand that very few people actually mention that they have this, that they do this particular skill set. It's just something to keep in mind, just in case you see a whole lot of red. Understand that these are things that the more of these that are required by the client, probably the more impossible it's going to be to fill them. So it's just one of these things that you want to make sure you've negotiated up front, that a lot of these things are nice to haves versus requirements. If these were things that were common, you would see green over in this particular side. The second part of this is the wage inflation side. So what we're doing is we're looking at our most recent 30 days, and we're going back to a period before then, and we're looking at how much wages have changed. So when we say low wage inflation, we actually tell you here, if you just hover over any of the tooltips, we tell you exactly how we calculated each of these values. So in a case of low wage inflation, it just means that when we look at the last 3 months compared to the same 3 months of a prior year ago, that wages have really not changed that much in that time frame. We can see by looking at the line that the wages are coming up recently, but when we kind of compare it to where we were the year before, they are barely unchanged. So this is something just to kind of keep in mind as you start to say, look, I want to fill this job for you, but wages are starting to accelerate. If I try to pay the wage of today, understand that these people are probably going to quit. We're certainly in that environment right now. So we feel that by showing you the trend, giving you some indication here, it allows you to go in and say, look, I filled this for you a couple of years ago. We were paying people $11. Understand it's now $14 an hour here, and I'm going to need, a much more competitive bill rate. Or if I'm on a markup, just understand that I'm going to have to pay people above this mark, because if these wages keep trending up, I could really, probably lose these people. And this is made very strong with us in the next section. But before I get to that, I want to show you one last feature. If you're ever in a small market and we do not have enough information to give you a reliable time series for that market, you can always toggle this over and say, hey, can you just show me for the US in general, what are wages doing, for general laborers in this particular case? And you can see that they have been accelerating. So you will always have something to go and have a conversation with, even if the information for your local market is relatively spotty based on the fact that very few people may be advertising and including a wage for it at that particular time. We can also include staffing companies in these particular numbers as well. So we can see what that could do to the pay rates, as well as what it does to demand, which we'll see in just a second. So with that in mind, I want to go down to the last part of this, which is demand. So we're also looking at what's happening in this market. And then what happens if we go back and compare this to other markets, once again, of like size, what is the demand looking like in Atlanta at this particular time? So we can see that relative to other markets, this is the most competitive, one of the most competitive markets that are out there. And you can see that, it really kind of hovered along for this particular job, but it's really skyrocketed recently. And this is another case where we can say, hey, if this is demand, let me see what it's like if we include staffing companies. If we do that, now we're dealing with 968 other unique postings. So if you as a staffing company were to go out right now and put this on the market, understand that you would be competing against almost 1,000 other postings for this exact same type of position, which is 141 more than we had last year at this time. You're dealing with 229 other companies that are trying to hire this as well. But if you start to think about this, we know that people in a lot of jobs have other jobs that they can do, especially if you're at the lower end of the spectrum. If you work in a warehouse, you can also do assembly line work. You can do general labor work. You can do all types of jobs that are around that. Well, we've given you the ability to see that total demand. So just in case your occupation isn't the one that's skyrocketing, we can say, well, show me for everything. So now for people who could do general labor jobs, we see that their total demand is actually almost 8,500 individual postings that are out there. And that's almost 2,000 more than there were last year at this time. So as you're negotiating with a client and you're talking about pay rates, the one thing you have to understand is you're not just competing against what you think this rate may be, but it's the rates of any of these other related jobs out there. And so if we scroll down, so you see I've included similar jobs, and you're like, well, what are those similar jobs? We can go down and see these other jobs. So we can see for some of these that they are around the price that we're paying. We see some that for individual titles, we see that they're much higher than what we're paying. And that the worker that you're trying to get has an option to choose any of these other jobs. So in this particular case, as we look at this 1397 and we look at how the competitors and so many of these other jobs are in the 14-15 range, that you're going to have to be in that range to find somebody, because you are dealing with such an overwhelming amount of demand for this type of a worker. So this is something, these particular features are things that we really wanted to strive to do that were new in the scene, which is, can I paint a picture of what the world looks like to the candidate that I'm trying to place? Because it may be that their particular job may not have a tremendous amount of numbers in their demand, even though we know that this is already high. But just to toggle that over and say, boy, the world available to them is absolutely outrageous. And you can see here, where this is coming from. So Amazon itself is accounting, for about basically almost 1 out of every, 4 to 5 of these postings out there. So it's just something that allows you to kind of see what your competition's doing. In the most recent several weeks, are they increasing the amount of postings they're putting on the market? Are they decreasing those? For these job titles that are out there that you're competing against, are they exploding in the new numbers, or are they declining in numbers? All of these aspects are all meant to help you to say, I need to go into this client. I'd like to fill this job. I know I can fill it because we do things like this. However, you've asked for so many things in your job description. Can we just take these elements out of the job description? Your price point, if your client comes to you and says, well, we can only pay 12, you can chart that on here. You can show them this is where you sit versus where the market's at. I'm going to need you to be at a much higher level to compete with where things are going right now, especially if you notice where this trend's at. And then lastly, you have this demand where you can show them the amount of demand that you have just in your particular job and in the jobs that are like it. And that is the entire tool. So we designed this to be as simple as possible. One last thing I do want to say is you can jump straight to SmartReq and you can say, look, I was sent a job description by a client. You can paste that job description in here. It'll analyze all of the skill sets just like we saw over here. It will give you different job titles to choose from what we've figured out this job likely is based on what the description is. And once you choose that job title, it will put that job title in, and then, like you say, add those skill sets to the side so that you will once again have an instantaneous negotiating weapon to go, okay, I can see what I'm getting myself into here. Looks like there's some skill sets in here that may be impossible to find. I know that the client was willing to pay this amount of money, but I know that I'm really going to have to pay this, or I'm not going to be able to find any. I do want people to understand the demand for this particular job at this time. So all of that can happen straight in the tool itself. So the goal with this obviously is that we know that there's a lot of turnover in the staffing industry. There's a lot of people going into markets, and sometimes you're only as good as the person who preceded you and what they told you. And we really wanted to come alongside of people and say, what if we can tell you something more and make you an expert immediately, give you a tremendous amount of market knowledge so that you can make these decisions with a lot more information than the people who've been doing this in the past. And what if we could do this at a price that, is typically a lot more affordable than what we typically have seen in the industry. So that is the whole concept behind it. Something that was easy to use, easy to describe to a client, and easy to make decisions with right off the bat. And that is SmartReq.
Unmute. Thank you for that, Ron. That was awesome. We have just a couple of questions here to get in before we're out of time. The most pressing ones: where do job postings come from, and how often are they updated?
Yep. So through the Burning Glass feed, now we do two things. So we scrape a lot of the job boards of the companies themselves. So like a Bank of America, we go to their actual website and we scrape everything off of there. The reason being is companies sometimes will put some postings on some job boards and some on niche job boards. Certain industries like energy, for example, will stick them on very niche job boards. And the fear there is if you're not scraping the right job board, you're going to miss those postings. So we go first to the companies, and then we also scrape all of the big job boards themselves. And that information is coming in every single night. So the wage data that you saw, the cards on the front end that actually have the postings, the demand data you're seeing in SmartReq is all being updated every single night. So this tool never runs out of value. It literally every single day is going to tell you the story of what's happening right now.
Yeah, so really it would be in a user's best interest to make logging in daily a good part of their routine in order to be the most effective at using the tool, correct?
I would think the best value is the fact that anytime you paste a job description in, you're getting an instant evaluation of that particular job description. So it's breaking down the skills, and then it's showing you the competitive situation right now. So that in that regard, yes, it's valuable anytime you have something new that you're investigating. It also has value in just every day going in and going, look, man, right now it's so tough to find warehouse workers. We're thinking about pivoting and doing something else. Okay, great. Go and investigate all of these other jobs that you were talking about. Look at the market conditions for those. Go look to see how many postings are out there. You could literally, spend an entire day, coming up with a new strategy for your market by just going and examining other job titles that you were thinking about doing and then seeing what the market conditions were like.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So this tool is different from a lot of other MZ Burning Glass tools. Can you talk about how much the tool costs?
Yeah, so basically the way we've structured this is we wanted this to be more of a frontline weapon, and we were really hoping that it would be something that could be consumed at a local P&L. So typically we've licensed to corporations at the corporate level, but what we do in this particular case is we would like to see this more at an office level. However, we do have a standard price. If you go to the website, it's $7,500 for a year. And that includes all of the updates we do to the tool. I'm constantly looking at how we can make the formulas better, how we maybe come up with new metrics. So it's going to include all of those things over the course of the year. Now, if you're in a company, you automatically have several offices that you're like, look, we all want to go in. It immediately drops the price down. So the 7,500 is history. That's for the single license for an office. But if you say, well, we've got multiple offices, then with those additional offices, each office will now pay a lower amount for that year's cost. So, and then if more come in during the course of the year, that at the renewal for the next year, we would include all of those in and drop everybody's cost. Additionally, going forward in the years after that, if a lot of these offices continue to opt in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it really is beneficial if you're thinking about using this across multiple offices to do kind of a volume bulk discount, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Cool. And then another common question that we get is, how soon can someone actually start using this tool after they purchase it?
Yep. So you can go contact us, and once we throw the contract through and you sign on, it's literally a day or two later that this is turned on. So if you see I was accessing this on the web, that is the way that you interact with it. We would literally, you would have the link and you would be turned on to it, and you could go in, start creating your presets and start operating right away immediately.
Awesome. Cool. Ron, I think those are all the most pressing questions that we have time for right now. Thank you for giving that demo. We're going to go ahead and flash the URL real quick here so that if anyone is really excited about this product and wants to go ahead and take the next step in talking to us about getting maybe a more personal demo with other members of their company, setting up a meeting, talking to our sales team about getting this in your hands right away, go ahead and visit that URL and fill out the form for us to go ahead and get in contact with you and set up a meeting. But other than that, I think that concludes our LinkedIn Live session. Thank you for your patience. I know we were a little bit late, and I know we had a couple of technical difficulties to work through. But thank you so much for joining, and thank you, Ron. And we'll see you next time on LinkedIn Live.